Have you ever sat in a room full of your own family and felt like you were quietly drifting somewhere far away, even though your body was right there at the table? It's a strange kind of silence, not the silence of a peaceful home, but the silence inside your chest, the one that makes you wonder why everyone else seems to belong, while you feel like a visitor. You watch the familiar faces, you hear the familiar jokes, and yet something in you stays distant, as if a glass wall separates you from the warmth everyone else seems to feel without effort. Sometimes this feeling begins long before you can name it. You might remember being a child, sitting at dinner, swinging your legs under the table, waiting for someone to notice you, to look at you, to truly see you. The food was warm, the lights were soft, the room was full, but the connection you needed never seemed to arrive. Maybe your parents were busy, tired, or simply unable to offer the emotional presence you didn't yet know how to ask for. And so, in that quiet place inside you, a tiny gap formed, a space where closeness should have taken root, but instead remained empty. Most people never talk about this emptiness. Society assumes that family automatically means affection, loyalty, and unconditional attachment. Growing up, you're taught that blood is thicker, that your family is supposed to be your safe place, your starting point, your anchor. But what happens when your emotional reality never matched that myth? What happens when the people who raised you gave you shelter, food, rules, and routines, but not the emotional attunement your nervous system was quietly waiting for? Psychologists call these early moments the blueprint of attachment. The subtle cues, the smiles, the shared glances, the soothing responses that teach your brain what connection feels like. When those moments are missing or inconsistent, the brain learns a different lesson. Not that you are unlovable, but that closeness is unreliable. Not that family is meaningless, but that it is unpredictable. And so you grow up learning to protect yourself by staying just a little bit distant, just a little bit detached, even from the people who share your last name. This distance isn't coldness, it isn't cruelty, it's a survival pattern, a shield made long before you understood what you were protecting yourself from. You didn't choose it, your nervous system shaped it for you, and now, as an adult, you may find yourself wondering why you can sit in the middle of your own family and still feel alone. So the real question becomes, where did this pattern begin? What happened in the quiet rooms of childhood that taught you to feel safer at a distance rather than close enough to be hurt? Have you ever wondered how a house can be full of people, full of noise, full of routine, yet still feel like an emotional desert? How a child can grow up surrounded by family and still carry the quiet belief that they were never truly seen? It begins subtly, almost invisibly, not with big tragedies, but with small absences that echo for years. You might remember moments from your own childhood where you sat on the edge of the living room, watching the people who were supposed to be your world move around you like distant planets. They were close enough to touch, yet too far to feel. Sometimes home doesn't feel like home because the people inside it are fighting invisible battles. A parent who is overwhelmed, exhausted, or emotionally unavailable isn't always cruel. They're often just surviving. They provide food, shelter, clothes, and structure, and from the outside it looks like a good upbringing. But a child doesn't just need stability. A child needs attunement. They need the soft nod that says, "I see you," the warm gaze that says, "You matter," the gentle presence that teaches their nervous system, "You are safe." Without these micro moments, the foundation of attachment is quietly weakened, long before the child can understand what's missing. You might picture a small child tugging at a parent's sleeve, trying to share a drawing or a thought or a feeling, only to be met with distracted eyes or hurried responses. Or a child who learns that expressing sadness makes people uncomfortable, so they begin to swallow their emotions like stones. Or the independent child everyone praises, not realizing independence was born from necessity, from the early lesson that no one will come when they cry. Neuroscience shows that the emotional circuits responsible for connection form through repeated patterns of warmth and responsiveness. When those patterns are inconsistent or absent, the brain adapts by shutting certain doors, creating a quiet void in the place where closeness should have lived. Children raised in emotional distance often become experts at self-soothing, not because they are strong, but because they had no other choice. They become hyper-independent, responsible too early, old before their time. They learn to blend in, to not need too much, to stay invisible so they won't be disappointed. And as the years pass, this survival strategy becomes part of their identity, a shadow stitched to their skin. You grow up thinking this is normal. You grow up believing that connection is something other people feel. But that childhood void doesn't disappear. It simply transforms. And one day, you find yourself wearing an adult mask, wondering why closeness still feels like a foreign language, even with the people who share your name. Have you ever noticed how some adults wear a kind of calmness that feels less like peace and more like armor? From the outside, you look composed, capable, independent, the one who doesn't need anyone, who handles everything alone. But deep down, you know it's not confidence holding you together. It's something much older, something stitched into you in childhood. It's the mask. You learned to wear long before you understood you were wearing it. As you grew older, emotional distance didn't disappear. It simply matured. It shaped itself into the lone wolf identity, the persona that claims solitude as a preference rather than a protective reflex. You tell people you're fine on your own, that you don't need closeness, that you're built differently, and maybe you even believe that. But somewhere underneath there is a shadow, the unmet need you locked away, because no one was there to hold it. You might notice it during family gatherings. Everyone laughs, reconnects, updates each other on their lives, and you sit there feeling like a visitor, passing through a world you never quite belonged to. The conversations feel distant, the hugs feel mechanical, and the warmth that others seem to feel so naturally barely reaches you. You smile, you nod, you participate, but it's like acting in a play where everyone else knows their lines except you. And when you leave, you don't feel sadness or longing. You feel nothing, a quiet, neutral emptiness that's easier to carry than the discomfort of pretending. This is the adult mask of detachment, the invisible wall your nervous system built to protect you from disappointments you once felt too deeply. Studies on attachment show that when a child grows up learning that closeness is unreliable, the brain adapts by numbing that longing. Neuroscience describes it like an oxygen mask of self-sufficiency. You learn to breathe alone because no one taught you how to breathe together. Hyper-independence becomes survival. Emotional distance becomes safety. And the heart becomes a room with locked doors. You feel it most when someone asks you to open up, to be closer, to let them in. Anxiety rises not because you don't care, but because you were never taught how to bridge that gap. You may even feel guilt for not missing people, guilt for not feeling the way you think you're supposed to feel, guilt for the numbness you can't control. But the truth is, this mask was formed for a reason. It protected you once. It kept you standing when connection felt dangerous. And yet, behind every mask lies a deeper truth, one the mind hides, but the body remembers, a truth that begins to unravel once you understand the science behind the walls you carry. Why does the heart stay quiet even when the people around you expect it to speak? Why does closeness feel like a foreign language, one your body doesn't instinctively know how to pronounce? The answer isn't that you're cold or broken or incapable of love. The truth is far more scientific and far more human. Your brain learned patterns long before you had the words to describe them. In childhood, the nervous system watches everything. It listens to tone, to touch, to presence. It measures safety not through logic, but through consistency. When emotional warmth is offered, the brain builds pathways that say, connection is safe. When warmth is absent, unpredictable, or tangled in stress, the brain builds a very different map. Attachment theorists call this avoidant or disorganized attachment, patterns that form when a child's emotional needs are met with silence, confusion, or inconsistency. It's not that you were unloved, it's that love wasn't communicated in the language your developing brain required. Neuroscience shows that bonding is not just emotional, it is chemical. Oxytocin, the hormone of trust and safety, flows when a caregiver is responsive and attuned. But when those moments are rare, the oxytocin pathways grow quieter. The limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, learns to protect itself by staying detached. It teaches you not to reach, not to expect, not to need. Your nervous system becomes a garden without water, functional, resilient, but dry in places where warmth should have bloomed. As you grow older, this adaptation becomes invisible. Emotional numbness isn't a dramatic collapse. It's a slow dissociation, a gentle drifting away from feelings that once felt overwhelming. You might go through life believing that you simply prefer distance, that you are naturally self-contained, but beneath that calm exterior is a nervous system shaped by survival. Emotional detachment is not a flaw, it is a safety mechanism. It is the brain doing exactly what it was trained to do, protect you from the pain of unmet needs. This is why family closeness feels different for you than it does for others. When someone reaches out, your body doesn't respond automatically. When someone expects affection, your heart doesn't light up on command. You are not defective, you are conditioned. You are the result of a childhood where the emotional environment taught you to rely on yourself, and your brain, loyal to its early training, continues to shield you even now. But every adaptation carries a shadow, and while detachment once kept you safe, it also takes something quietly precious in return. Behind the protective numbness lies a deeper cost, a cost you may not fully see until the silence inside you begins to echo. Have you ever felt like you were standing inside your own life, yet somehow watching it from a few steps away? It's a strange ache, not sharp, not explosive, but quiet, almost polite, a kind of suffering that hides under your ribs where no one can see it. Emotional distance begins as protection, but over time it becomes something heavier, something colder, something that makes you feel like an alien in the place where you are supposed to feel safest. You feel it most during moments that should be intimate, a family dinner, a birthday, a conversation that everyone else seems to find meaningful. You sit there, present but disconnected, listening but not absorbing, participating but never fully entering the emotional warmth others seem to swim in effortlessly. You become the ghost at your own family table, visible, functional, but untouchable. Their laughter reaches your ears but not your chest. Their affection brushes past you like wind against a window, felt only for a moment before disappearing. The hardest part is the paradox. You want belonging, you crave connection. Somewhere deep inside, there is a quiet longing for home. Not the physical place, but the emotional one you never had. And yet, when closeness approaches, your body freezes. Your heart, wrapped in winter for so many years, does not thaw on command. It stays cautious, silent, waiting for a danger that no longer exists, but still feels real. Neuroscience calls this emotional inhibition, the brain's old fear rewriting the present. But to you, it simply feels like something is missing, something broken, something you can't force into being, no matter how much you try. This creates a secret kind of guilt. The guilt of not feeling what you're supposed to feel. The guilt of not missing people you should miss. The guilt of watching your family love you in a language you can't translate. You begin to wonder if you're ungrateful, or cold, or incapable of the love others find so natural. But beneath that guilt is something more painful. The loneliness that grows quietly like a plant in the dark. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It simply spreads its roots through your life, showing up in friendships where you keep people at arm's length, in relationships where you disappear emotionally without meaning to, in moments when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and you have no real answer. Detachment saved you once, but now it isolates you. And the world around you, with its myths of unconditional family warmth, its assumptions about how people should feel, its pressure to be close, only deepens the wound. Because nothing hurts more than being misunderstood by the very people who insist they know you best. And this is where society plays its part, shaping expectations, masking wounds, and turning silence into a burden you quietly carry. Have you ever noticed how the world speaks about family as if it's a universal language everyone is born knowing how to speak? As if love, loyalty, and closeness arrive pre-installed in your heart the moment you enter the world. Society whispers rules into your ears before you're old enough to question them. Family comes first, blood is thicker than water, good children stay close. These words sound warm, protective, even noble. But for someone who doesn't feel that natural attachment, they become invisible shackles wrapped around the heart. You grow up watching families in movies embrace effortlessly, parents who understand their children without words, siblings who feel like teammates. You hear relatives tell you how lucky you are to have each other, how nothing matters more than your own blood. And somewhere inside you, a quiet fear begins to grow. The fear that you're the only one who feels differently, that something in you is defective because the warmth others describe simply doesn't ignite within you. You start performing connection instead of feeling it, hoping no one notices the emotional gap you can't explain. In collectivist cultures, this pressure is even heavier. Love is often measured in obedience, in how much time you give, how available you are, how tightly you hold the family structure together. If you step back to breathe, to protect yourself, or to simply exist as an individual, you're seen as disloyal. Distance is misread as rebellion. Silence is mistaken for disrespect. You become the outsider not because you chose to be, but because the culture leaves no room for emotional realities that don't match its script. On the other side, individualistic cultures romanticize independence, but even there, family closeness is idealized. People talk about Sunday dinners, shared holidays, lifelong emotional bonds, as if they are the natural baseline of every human life. And if you don't feel these connections, the world quietly points a finger at you, labeling you cold, ungrateful, emotionally unavailable. They never ask what your childhood taught your nervous system. They never consider that attachment is learned, not guaranteed. Instead, they assume you failed at an exam you never had the chance to study for. This cultural myth creates a deep divide inside you. On one side is your emotional truth, the distance, the numbness, the effort it takes to feel something that should come naturally. On the other side is the weight of expectation, the pressure to smile, to fit in, to pretend the bond runs both ways. And in that space between truth and expectation, loneliness grows thicker. You start to carry a resentment that you don't fully understand, mixed with a guilt that isn't yours to bear. And slowly, this cultural pressure begins to shape your inner world, carving quiet wounds, shaping identity, and planting seeds for emotional consequences that follow you long into adulthood. What do you do with a feeling that never arrives? Not pain, not anger, not even hatred, just nothing. On the outside, your life looks normal. You go to family gatherings, you reply in the group chats, you show up for birthdays and weddings. You stand in a crowd of people you're related to, yet feel utterly alone, like a stranger who's wandered into the wrong story. You know you're supposed to feel something, warmth, gratitude, belonging. But instead there is a strange, echoing quiet inside you, and that quiet starts to feel heavier than any loud emotion ever could. Over time, this silence turns into chronic guilt. You tell yourself, they're not perfect, but they're still my family. I should feel more. You remember moments where they helped you, supported you, or simply stayed. And instead of gratitude, you feel a hollow pressure in your chest, as if your heart is failing an exam it was never prepared for. The guilt is not just about what you don't feel, it's about who you think that makes you. You start to wonder if you're ungrateful, unloving, or fundamentally wrong in some way that can't be fixed. This guilt mixes with anxiety every time family expectations appear. A phone call you don't want to return, a visit that drains you before it even begins, a conversation where someone says, "You never come around anymore," and you don't know how to explain that your distance is not rebellion, it's self-preservation. Your nervous system remembers the emotional static of your childhood, the lack of attunement, the constant pressure to be someone you couldn't be. So your body tenses, your mind rehearses excuses, and your heart retreats further into its quiet shell. Emotional suppression becomes your default setting. You swallow your discomfort, your confusion, your resentment. You smile in family photos while a storm brews inside, unseen and unnamed. That storm doesn't vanish when you leave the room. It follows you into the rest of your life. It seeps into friendships, making you hold people at a safe distance. It slips into romantic connections, where vulnerability feels like walking into a burning house. You want to love and be loved, but every time someone gets close, the old wiring activates: protect, withdraw, shut down. Attachment theory calls this avoidant bonding, but to you, it just feels like failing at intimacy over and over again. Slowly, your identity begins to wrap itself around this emptiness. You start to see yourself as the distant one, the one who doesn't care, even though beneath that story is someone longing for a kind of connection they were never taught to hold. Your self-worth bends under the weight of what you cannot feel until you start confusing your survival adaptations with your true nature. And yet, somewhere beneath the numbness, a quiet question begins to form. A question that doesn't accuse you, but gently wonders, what if this emptiness isn't who you are, but what happened to you? And what if, in ways you can't yet see, it is still possible to gently learn a different way of being close? Have you ever wondered why healing feels so fragile, almost like holding a small bird in your hands? Delicate, trembling, unsure whether it wants to stay or fly away? After years of emotional distance, closeness isn't something you can force. It's something you learn the way you once learned to walk, slowly, awkwardly, with steps that don't always make sense. And maybe that's the hardest truth to accept, that your heart isn't late or broken. It is simply learning a language it was never taught. You might notice the beginning of this shift in the smallest moments. A quiet evening when you allow yourself to feel a flicker of warmth for someone without shutting it down. A conversation where you let a little honesty slip through the cracks in your armor. Or maybe it's the sudden realization that you're tired of being the strong one, the distant one, the one who never needs anything from anyone. Healing often begins with exhaustion, with the quiet whisper that you don't want to carry the mask forever. Psychologists call this process emotional awareness, the slow, gentle practice of noticing what you feel before judging it, burying it, or running away from it. It might look like acknowledging the loneliness you've denied for years, or recognizing that the resentment you carry isn't cruelty. It's the shadow of a childhood where you weren't given what you needed. The nervous system doesn't unlearn survival overnight, but every moment of awareness is a new path forming in the brain, a soft rewiring that makes connection just a little less frightening. Some people find healing in reparenting, becoming the adult they needed when they were young. It might mean speaking kindly to yourself, setting boundaries that protect rather than isolate, or learning to receive care without feeling weak. Others find it in chosen family, the friends, mentors, or partners who offer the warmth their childhood lacked. There is no rule that says love must come from blood. Sometimes the safest home is the one you build later in life, brick by brick, heart by heart. And closeness doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. It can grow quietly, like a garden learning how to accept sunlight after seasons of cold. You don't have to suddenly love your family more. You don't have to force feelings that refuse to appear on command. Healing is not about manufacturing attachment. It is about understanding yourself deeply enough to know what you can offer, what you cannot, and what you are still learning. And as you take these gentle steps toward connection, another truth begins to emerge. A truth that leads you toward the final realization of this journey. Sometimes, the heart finds its home not in where it began, but in where it finally learns to breathe. Have you ever considered that the word family might not mean the same thing to every heart? Some people speak of home the way others speak of sunlight, warm, effortless, a place they return to without thinking. But for you, the idea of home might feel more like a question than an answer. A place you were born into, but not a place where your soul ever learned to rest. And that truth, whispered quietly inside you for years, does not make you broken. It makes you honest. There are people who believe love is automatic, that blood creates bonds stronger than experience, stronger than history, stronger than pain. But the heart does not follow rules written by culture. The heart follows safety. The heart follows presence. The heart attaches where it is held, not where it is told to belong. You might remember times in your life where a stranger was kinder to you than someone who shared your last name, or moments when a friend understood your silence better than family understood your words. And in those moments you discovered a different kind of truth. That connection is chosen, nurtured, earned, not inherited by default. Some people are born into houses where love is spoken fluently. Others are born into houses where emotions are foreign languages no one ever taught. And if you grew up without the emotional scaffolding that creates closeness, your heart adapted in the only way it knew how. It protected itself. It learned distance. It built a quiet room inside you where feeling nothing felt safer than feeling too much. But even then, somewhere beneath the numbness, a seed remained. The possibility that one day you could find or build a home where your heart could finally exhale. Philosophers often say that we spend our adult lives trying to heal the childhoods we never understood. Neuroscience echoes this, showing that attachment is plastic, that the brain can learn new emotional patterns long after childhood ends. This means that family is not a fixed destiny, but an evolving landscape. You are allowed to create a circle of people who feel like warmth. You are allowed to let your heart attach slowly, carefully, to those who treat you with gentleness. And you are allowed to step back from relationships that drain your spirit, even if they are tied to you by blood. Because family is not always where you start. Sometimes family is where you finally feel safe enough to stop running from yourself. Sometimes home is the friend who listens, the partner who stays, the mentor who sees you, or the community where your silence is understood instead of questioned. And maybe the deepest truth of all is this: attachment is not destiny, it is a journey. And your heart, no matter how distant or tired, is still capable of finding the place where it can finally rest.